So there's a lot to unpack when you are comparing two devices as different as the Surface Duo and the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 2. They are so radically different in so many ways while being similar in terms of the sorts of people that are looking to buy them that I don't think I could possibly do a single video and really in-depth cover everything there is to talk about because there's so much to talk about here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this part one of a series of videos that are going to cover all the things that you might consider comparing between these two devices. And this part one is going to compare the easiest thing, the simplest thing I can compare, which is the camera. This is not something that all of you are going to be like the number one most important thing, but for someone like me, this is actually really important. In the past, I was the kind of person that took a lot of pride in my photography, and I took a lot of mobile pictures. I always carried a phone with a really solid camera. And when I started carrying the Surface Duo as my daily driver, well, you can ask my wife, and you can look at my Google Photos account, and you can determine that I pretty much stopped taking pictures when I was out and about because the pictures were, one, not very good, and two, it was such a pain in the butt to get a picture with this thing with the camera flippy-flopping around, and I just stopped taking pictures because it just wasn't worth doing any longer. Well, now I've had the Z Fold 2 in my pocket for a few days now, and I find myself doing something that I used to do a lot, and it's take a bunch of pictures. So let's talk about what it's like to take pictures on these two devices. So let's start with the Duo. When you use the Surface Duo to take a picture, the best way to do it, and I'm talking about taking a picture of the world, not a selfie, because who cares about selfies, really? Here's what you typically are going to do. You're going to open the thing up. Your camera is over here, so you're going to fold the thing over into phone mode, and I've clearly clicked on something in the midst of doing that. Now you're going to want to launch your camera app, and you're off and running. You can now take a picture. Be careful though, because if you're aiming down or aiming up at things, it might just happen that the camera thinks that you've rotated it around and it may try to switch what screen it's on. And sometimes it won't do that no matter what I try. Sometimes it does it when I don't want it to. Sometimes it won't do it at all when I want it to. But from there, if you can get it to stay here where it's supposed to be, it's an okay experience. And the primary reason is because you have a giant viewfinder, and that's really nice. I would recommend using a port of Gcam Go and not the stock camera app because there is a ton of shutter lag. You take a picture and it waits and it waits, and then it clicks the picture, and it's super annoying, and it doesn't work that well. What about on the Z Fold 2? First thing you're going to notice is that there's not really much to do. You just unlock your phone and open up the camera app, and there you go. And of course, the Z Fold 2 has some modes that the Duo does not have. While they both have portrait mode, the Z Fold does have things like live focus. You can see what the portrait's going to look like before you take it. A single take mode that will record for 15-30 seconds and then pull from that video a whole bunch of stills that might be of interest to you, which is actually really useful. Live focus video as well, which is going to kind of give you a portrait video style mode. There's also another thing worth talking about here. You've got 3 different camera modules here, and they range from an ultra wide, a telephoto, and a standard. They're all 12 megapixels, and they're all pretty decent. You have a 10 megapixel selfie camera on the exterior screen, another 10 megapixel selfie camera on that big interior screen. One thing they both have in common is that while you can take a picture on the tiny exterior screen, you can also simply open the device and take a photo on a gigantic viewfinder that you have on the inside. And it's actually a bigger viewfinder than what you have on the Surface Duo because it is using the whole thing instead of just one screen. You know what I mean? And I find that to be actually really enjoyable. I mean, I know a lot of people make fun of the dads at concerts holding up their iPad, and it's not quite that bad. It's pretty bad, but man, I'm telling you right now, you take a couple of photos in this setup and you're going to really like it. You're going to find yourself opening the device to take a photo instead of using this, partially because this kind of is tiny and sucky, but also because that's just a really good way to be able to take a picture. You can really see if you're in focus or not. You can really see the details of what the picture is. You're going to get really good experience. So now let's actually take a look at what these photos do look like. I made an album here, Duo versus Fold. And we're just going to run through these pictures, and we're just going to talk about how they look as best I can. So this picture, first off, it's going to go back and forth, duo, fold, unless I tell you otherwise. This photo is taken on the Surface Duo. And look, this is in broad daylight, and it's a nice sunny day out, so this photo looks reasonably good. If you zoom in here, you get some decent detail. It's a little grainy. Again, this is an 11 megapixel camera, so it's not going to be the best thing in the world. When you zoom in on some of the more shadowy areas, it actually did an okay job with the HDR, but you got a lot of grain, a lot of loss of detail there. But look, it's a passable photo. Let's go to the Z Fold, and immediately the colors, the saturation is boosted through the freaking roof. I think the real life looked a bit between these two. The sky was bluer than this. The greens are greener than this, but they're not quite this punchy. But that's a choice that Samsung does go with. Let's compare this low light area down here. Much more detail. I think it did probably a better job in the HDR as well. There's a little bit more detail in the trees, and overall, it's a point of preference, but I do think that this is a more pleasing photo than that one, and it's definitely a more detailed photo. All right, so back to the Surface Duo. This is my water hose out back next to my little fire pit. And, you know, again, broad daylight, it's a passable photo. When you zoom in, though, you start noticing the low level of detail in some of these things here. When we switch over to the Z Fold, it is a much brighter, much punchier image, and when you zoom in, you can see there is quite a bit more data being retained. Even though it's an 11 megapixel camera versus a 12 megapixel camera, well, that 12 megapixel camera is doing a lot better job than the Duo. Here's the bench out by my pond, a little cameo there, a little photo bomb by Copper. And again, this is a fine picture by the Surface Duo, but the Z Fold is much brighter. It's much more contrasty, much punchier, and overall more detailed. It's just a simply better image. Here's the barn out back. We're going to start seeing a pattern here. When you start zooming into these things, the detail is just not great. It's grainy, and it's a little flat. It's fine until you see the Z Fold version of the photo, and you notice that you're getting a lot more detail when this clears up. There we go. A lot more detail. You can actually almost read that it says Toro there, and a lot punchier colors, a lot more contrast. Trying to take here a photo of this tiny little flower next to the house, and you know, I tried as best I could to get it to be in focus on the Duo, and the Duo just really could not grab the focus well. It might have been a little bit too close, but it was really hard to tell. This is about as good as it gets. On the Z Fold, I mean, look, do I need to even really dive into this all that deeply? Do I even need to really talk about it? This is clearly a more pleasing photo than that. And here is my chameleon ducky. She is a difficult photograph to capture because she likes to move around and hiss and be very angry with me. But this is what the Duo managed, and this is what the Z Fold managed. This is a much better picture because I was actually able to meet her, to touch to focus on Ducky's face. And as she moves around to hiss at me, well, guess what? The focus stayed in place on her face, and you get a pretty decent job focusing on a moving, angry target. Future editing Shane stepping in here because in my haste to get this video shot and edited, I realized that I left out a very important aspect of photography on the Surface Duo and on the Z Fold 2, and that is low light photography. So I'm going to quickly insert some low light shots here. We'll talk about them too, and then I'll get you back to the proper main video. So this one right here, this is a low light shot here of the sun beginning to set. And I wanted to start here because it's not that low light. It's just not broad daylight. As you've seen in shots that are really well lit, the Duo does okay, although the Fold does top it. When the light starts to decrease, even in the slightest amount, that is when the gap becomes absolutely monstrous. So if you look here, just zoom in on literally anything at all, and the profound lack of detail. I mean, this is just a blurry mush in all of this stuff. The color reproduction is fine, but it is just a blurry mush. Let's jump over to what the Z Fold 2 pulled off, and well, look at that. You've got actual detail. This is a tree with limbs, and these are shingles, and you can actually see individual details here where you just couldn't on the Duo, and that is going to only get worse as you push into lower light situations. So this is a corner in the studio here where I keep a few knickknacks. This is the Duo, and at first it defaulted to using flash, and I left it that way because I thought, well, look, let it use whatever tool it wants to use. And with flash on, you know, it's okay. It's not absolutely terrible. I don't like the way flash looks with the photograph. I hate flash. It just tends to look bad. This is what the Duo looked like without flash, though. So obviously the flash did help a lot. Without any kind of illumination, though, this is absolutely horrific. You cannot read any of this. This is just an absolute blurry mess. Now you go to the Z Fold, and of course the Z Fold does have a low light mode, and it does a really, really good job. In fact, you can almost make out the text here on this box. But yeah, I mean, I don't really need to go into too much detail to tell you that this versus this is a pretty insurmountable difference. And then here is a shot of just my guitar in the corner. And this is, again, there is some light coming in. So this is not crazy low light, but it is enough for the Duo to begin to choke and to really have some problems. And on the Z Fold, well, guess what? That's an actual usable shot. You've got good detail, not a lot of grain. The shot looks pretty good. All right, so that's enough from me and low light photography. Let's get back to Past Shane. So we've talked now quite a bit about photography, but what about on the video side of things? Well, lucky for you, I have a couple of samples to play here for you. Okay, so I am filming on the front-facing camera on the Z Fold 2 and the Surface Duo, both of them propped up in laptop mode, serving as their own tripod. This is the front-facing camera on the Z Fold 2. This is the only camera on the Surface Duo. Okay, so there you go on the Surface Duo. I mean, it's passable as a webcam. It's totally fine. Well, let's see for a second how that compares to something you're going to get on the Z Fold. Okay, so I'm now filming on the Z Fold 2 and the Surface Duo, both filming at 4K 30 FPS. On the Surface Duo, I'm using the only camera available. On the Z Fold 2, I am using the front-facing camera, the 10 megapixel interior big screen front-facing camera. Like I said, both of these are in laptop mode. So you can get an idea here about the audio quality on the Z Fold 2 as well as on the Surface Duo. And I mean, look, they're not all that different, to be honest with you. I do think that the Z Fold is a little bit sharper, but they're fairly similar. But, well, there's this little detail that we need to talk about. Although there is a really big advantage that the Z Fold 2 does have, and that's the ability to flip this thing around, use the outer display as a viewfinder so I can see what I'm filming while using the primary sensor on the Z Fold 2 instead of using that much worse 10 megapixel selfie camera. I'm not filming on the 12 megapixel primary sensor on the Z Fold 2. And that is a huge difference in quality and the ability to flip that thing around and use a much better camera. And I think that really underlines the whole issue here. The Surface Duo is using a very low quality, simple sensor there. And when you flip over here to the Z Fold, well, you've got three far superior cameras. And I know that a lot of you guys and gals are going to say, I don't care about photography on my Surface Duo. Fair enough. If you don't care about photography on your Surface Duo, ignore the contents of this particular video and roll right on. But a lot of people do. I do. And this is something that when I walk around with the Fold in my pocket versus with the Duo in my pocket, I'm a lot happier to go out on a hike, to the park, anywhere where I might want to take a picture. Boy, am I so happy to have the Fold in my pocket and not the Duo, because I might actually be able to take a damn picture. So guys, like I said, there's going to be a lot more coverage coming. There's going to be things like a hardware video, of course, a multitasking video. That's going to take a little bit more time because I need to get used to the multitasking on the Z Fold before I tell you if it's any good or not. I think it's probably pretty good, but it's too soon for me to say that for sure. So stay tuned for the multitasking video as well. And like I said in an earlier video, if there's any particular topic that you want me to cover, please tell me in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to cover those topics in the coming days and weeks. So guys, like I said, stay tuned for those videos, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.